There we go. Cool. Welcome everybody. So do you see the PowerPoint? You see the screen? Somebody give me a heads up. Yep. Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep.
Excellent. So I think more people are kind of jumping on here, which is great. But we'll get started here. As we say, bonus points for turning your camera on. You can spend those in the virtual store for drinks afterwards. That does humanize it a little bit. We're on so many calls. It's really nice to see people, especially when you're talking. You don't have to be on all the time, but when you're talking or you want to, gets a little light, go ahead and turn your camera on and see who you are. I'm Daniel, and welcome to Let's Get Technical. So we're going to do a couple things today. We're going to, like usually, just do some introductions or some new people or some returning people just to say hello, where you're from. And then I'm going to give an update on, if Eric is here, actually, I'm going to ask him. I don't know if I've seen him yet. There was the Ontologies work group on last Friday. I'm interested in hearing from if anyone was on that. But I want to do a quick update on the most exciting news, which is we're coming to HIMSS. We're going to HIMSS. And we're bringing this work and consent to HIMSS at the pre-conference. So I'll talk about that a little bit, and share my enthusiasm, and then we'll sort of turn the bulk of the meeting over to our good friends and colleagues at MayJuun and Meld and Interoperability Institute and Unify. So it'll be a mashup today of the cool work that's going on in Connecticut and in New Jersey and elsewhere. Excuse me, and the technology that could support that in other locations. So we'll give them the bulk of the time there, and hopefully there'll be a lot of good conversation. Excuse me. Okay, so with that, let me just welcome whoever's new to the call here, or just to turn your camera on and say hello, who you are, where you're from. So I think John Velquez, are you? I don't remember you. You want to say hi? Hey, John.
Hi, I just turned my camera on. I'm from AWS. I'm a cool. Technical business development manager in the Health and Human Services practice. I work with Mary Sarah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's see, who else? Gabrielle.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the invite. It was very kind for MayJuun team to extend the invitation. I'm Gabrielle Gonzalez. I work with EMI advisors and serve as health equity manager, have been supporting interoperability projects, such as the CDC public health use cases for leveraging social determinants of health. And most recently supporting our Affinity Pilots group that I think some of you have attended. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful.
And I'll jump in after
great.
Gabby, if that's okay. My name is Demery, and I also work at EMI. We're joining just to kind of observe the MayJuun demo here this afternoon. So thank you so much for inviting us. I work closely with Gabby on the ACL Social Care Referrals Challenge and the Gravity Pilots Affinity Group.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Who wants to go? Emily? Himali.
Yeah, sorry. This is Himali. I'm a terminologist on the Gravity project, and I'm also from the EMI team. So we are here to support MayJuun and all other participants, and looking forward to learn from the presentation.
Fantastic.
I can chime in too. My name is Jillian. Oh, sorry.
No, go.
Piggybacking on my team there from EMI.
Yes.
Senior Health Equity Manager at EMI Advisors and Program Manager of the Gravity Project. I am supporting the team as well in learning more about the pilot efforts underway here and the team's work on implementing the standards to support ongoing work in the around the pilots work stream and Gravity standards implementation. So
Wow.
Thanks for having me as well.
Guys are here in force. It's great. We're forcing EMI to go to somebody else's meetings now for the first time. So Appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thank you guys.
Who else? Demery? And then off to Carolyn quickly, and gosh, all sorts of.
Yes, just got done introducing myself, sorry.
Oh. Who else is new today?
Hi, the meeting was forwarded to me. I run the Rochester HIE, and it was forwarded to me by some of our colleagues. My name's Marlene Bissett.
Welcome, welcome. All right. Anyone else? There's too many names on the screen now.
Hi, everyone. I'm from New York eHealth Collaborative. I got the opportunity to run the data quality work group yesterday, and some folks from MayJuun were in that meeting. So Bronx Rio forwarded this webinar to us, which was great. So just give us the opportunity to learn a little bit from you. Thank you.
Great. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again also, Dave.
All right. Anyone else? Love to hear where you're from. If you're shy, come on. Okay. Okay, then let me welcome everybody. It's great to have so many new people, and the circles continue to expand, and the connections continue to expand, which is exactly perfect right now. So, Eric, are you on the line? Eric Young? No, okay. Well, maybe I'll join us in a bit. So I'm so delighted to tell folks that we've been focused a lot the last couple of years on consent in all sorts of different ways, and have been torturing everybody with this topic. And we have participated in a number of events, including the ONC's e-discovery last summer, and had the privilege of putting together a national scan and looked at a lot of the ONC LEAP and CDS work on the HIEs and a lot of other referral networks and many of the associations, what was going on with consent, and have really been able to track it, and have focused a number of the sessions here on consent, recognizing, without going into any detail, without consent, you can't share data, personalized data. So it's really as simple as that. And so we need to address that issue if you want to do care coordination or whole person care or anything like that. So that's the ingoing premise. And so I think we've got a little bit of momentum. We've got 3 pilot sites that have expressed interest in doing stuff, learning about how to move into this in Colorado, New York, and Minnesota, maybe California. And there's a collaborative of, last time we met as a group, there were about 50 or 60 people who are involved either in the proof of concept sites that are being thought about, designed, or in the learning collaborative around that they're not ready yet to commit to actual implementation of a MVP on a consent model. However, they want to participate in that. And so there's a number of people there. So there's really a nice collaborative group of folks. My screen, okay. So it's all those forces are coming together. And we've been able to now connect with our colleagues at HIMSS to actually are now planning an event during the policy policy workshop during the pre-conference. We've done a number of different projects with HIMSS over the past, and I'm really delighted because in many ways it's cultivating the healthcare community, the medical community around social determinants. So if you were at HIMSS last year, so you saw SDOH on everything and everybody. And so we've been working with Valerie Rogers and Tom Leary, who are in government affairs, to integrate social care into HIMSS and with HIMSS in whatever ways we can do that. And so a really exciting definitive next step on that is this policy workshop we're going to hold on the 17th for half a day, where we're going to talk about sort of what's going on and break into some work groups and talk about what are the 1 or 2 policy things that we could change at a national level would actually move this stuff forward. And we're good.
Oh, good.
Yeah, really exciting stuff. And we were able to receive some support from the State Health and Values Strategy Group. a program actually out of Princeton, for those of you at Princeton. And it's an RWJF funded program that really looks at Medicaid and trying to improve at the state level. So they're helping us get there and pay for some of the stuff and participate in it. So we expect their participation to pick up in the next couple of weeks as well. The other part is after the workshop will be on days Tuesday through Thursday or Friday within the showcase, the interoperability showcase at HIMSS. We're going to be sort of cohabitating with IHE and a meets group and InterOp.Community and a whole bunch of other folks and the Unify partners that are there, sort of in the showcase, next to the showcase, and talking about a lot of the work that we're doing, and have just a variety of opportunities to demo stuff, to talk to people, to do maybe some sessions talking to folks about various kinds of work streams that you're all doing. And so that's what we're about to do over the next 6-7 weeks. And so all hands on deck from our shop to make that happen, along with all of you, either directly or indirectly. It occurred to me as well, maybe we can even try to do a live stream from the workshop, because that would be cool, right? So Jim, if you could write that down so we don't forget that. Somebody write it down, because I think that there's a lot of people who would want to participate in that thing. So we have room for about 50. We have a room that HIMSS and the Government Affairs has given that we can use that seats about 50. So we're being as planful as possible about how to have good representation from as broad as we can across federal, state, and local industry partners, academic partners, association partners, developers. How do we get as good a view as we can with a view on policy, and then how do we drive that down into the next steps? And then what'll come out of that is a commitment from HIMSS to actually build this into a year-long kind of planning. So how do we move consent forward, kind of like what HIMSS did, and some of us participated on their SDOH work group. So it's a great partnership to have, and I think it's a good time to be doing that. So if folks, I'm sure a lot of people want to go, and I'm not sure we have room for everybody, or I'm not sure I know your interest in attending, but if you do want to go, just put a note in the chat or email me and say, I'm going to be at HIMSS and I'm interested in participating in some way, shape, or form. And then we're putting together a list right now to be able to sort of go through it and very methodically select, invite people to come, because we want to have, federal representation from the agencies in terms of kind of some of the policy levers that are in their hands that will be helpful to move in the right direction. And then, of course, our state partners, we hope we have folks from New York, Minnesota, Colorado, California, Maryland, and other places, Arizona actually, as well, specifically, number of the counties within there. So it should be an interesting group of folks. So let me know what you want to do. And before we turn our attention to the feature of the day, I just want to open it up and ask if there's any comments, questions quickly. We can spend a couple minutes on that, or if anyone wants to add anything to that. Good ideas as well. The floor is open. You're all
Hey, Dan, Shelley London here. I just wanted to point out the comment that Brian had put in the chat window about doing a rehearsal before HIMSS.
Oh yeah, Brian, you want to say something about that?
Sure. As part of the workshop and as part of the IHE Connect-a-thon, we are planning on doing a demonstration of consent-mediated SDOH referrals.
Some boys, some girls.
Please mute yourself if you are on.
And that's
got
okay.
Wild ones in the house.
I thought that was a supportive comment. And it would make some sense for us to be able to do an early rehearsal, if you will, through Unify. And I've already got a number of organizations that are interested in participating. It's going to be a greatest hits of our past. But it is only this very hour that I have learned that this has been funded. So for anybody that I haven't reached out to who has worked on these things in the past, like I'm looking at you, Gray, here on my screen, I'll be reaching out now that I know that it's actually funded to find out if you're interested.
Cool. So one of the things that I wanted to just sort of showcase, because we have coming up next week, we don't have a meeting, but the week after that, we're scheduled, Beth Thayer, who's on the call with us, is scheduled to talk about some of the absolutely amazing work they're doing in Arizona with youth diversion programs, low tech and high tech, or high touch and low tech, and all the variations in between. And then we don't have anything actually scheduled after that. There's some opportunities to look at some things, some rapidly evolving things, but I think what we're going to do then is probably concentrate the meetings after the 8th on preparation for HIMSS, in terms of going through the agenda, in terms of really refining the kind of questions, thinking about the breakouts, kind of sort of preparing for the policy conversation so it can start at a 201 or a 301 level as opposed to a 101 level. We want to come into this with a sophisticated view of what are the challenges, where is 42 CFR now? When is it going to actually, when is the NPRM going to get finalized, and when can you actually design for something? That's a big question out there. Maybe we can answer that question. Who knows? Maybe folks can do that. So also, who you think should be at this event will be important, right? Do you have connectivity into different agencies, into the legal side, into the technical side, that ought to be there, and so there's a lot of choices to make. But the good news is this is a good, really functional working group. We did the national action agenda. In fact, I think of this sort of as the second phase of national action agenda. We did that, we identified consent, and now we're bringing consent onto the national stage, which was our goal. We want to showcase this, we want to highlight it, and we want to bring the best minds from across the country to figure this out in a way that can be replicated efficiently, not freely, but efficiently. And there's budget to do it, and how do we make that happen? So this is our shot at it, and I'm excited to be able to do that. So we'll schedule probably the couple of meetings after that, 2 or 3 that will be focused on the agenda, as well as some intermediary meetings as well that we'll have in order to really do the work that needs to get done in terms of this agenda, and create a library and share with people some of the material there. Okay, before we move on, any other questions that people want to bring up? And again, there's some good response in the chat if folks want to participate, especially you guys from EMI, the linkages between what the MVPs and the pilots, and the overlap with the work that's going on with personas and use cases is, it's a good opportunity to actually take another bite at that apple, and to be able to do that at HIMSS and do it before that, along with ACL and the teams here, really represents something extraordinary in terms of adaptability. Okay, so I've said what I wanted to say, put it that way. So if there's no other business to be had, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Rita. Just a quick question, because I know there's been a lot of focus on consent. I was curious as to whether the folks that are Shift Interoperability are involved, since they also do a lot, or are focused on like consent and things related to sensitive sharing.
Yeah, part of the exercise, part of doing this is, we've participated in Shift. Hannah has been presented here last year sometime, I think. I know some folks have been part of their work, especially on granular consent, which is really important for some folks in particular. So yeah, absolutely engage folks. The list that we're thinking about are, if you go to the NIC site and you see the people who are engaged in these meetings, there's about 30 to 35 people. A lot of those people are involved or have been involved with various standards groups, various bodies, all those things over that we've been churning, and for which Brian has been patiently participating in many, many, many of them. Unbelievable patience. He gets the standards award for the year. So yeah, so absolutely want to make sure we don't miss the right voice, right? Or make sure we include as many right voices as we can. And we can plan for a bigger event also later in the summer, either maybe at MESC, we do a bigger event or something like that. It's good to do it within the context of a large conference, though, because putting one together is very difficult and expensive. So to do it inside of one that would have applicability, like Medicaid would have a huge applicability for consent and all the pieces around it that we're trying to address here. So hope that answers your question. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just I for some reason I thought I had heard on one of their calls that they were doing some kind of demo, but I don't know if they're actually going through with that or not. So,
well, I hope if they are that we're connecting, so we can make sure that we close that loop. I suspect in the next week we're going to start to reach out to folks and say, hey, are you going to be at, first the question is, are you going to be at HIMSS, right? And then the second question is, what's the overlap, what's the relevance to so we'll do a little matrix, right? And how many, what people bring to the table there for sure. And it's part of an ongoing conversation. It's not like a one and done. We've got a webinar series coming out of that with HIMSS, and there's a work group and a committee. So, we'll try to blend and braid as best we can going forward. And I imagine there'll be a lot of new people that'll come out of it, hopefully, that have interest. So, cool. Okay. So with that, let me give it to Dave. And we'll spend the next hour or so talking about the MayJuun work and the reference platform. With that, Dave, I'll drive the slides here. Just tell me when you want to
that's great. If you could just go to the next slide, Daniel. So big picture, my name's Dave Walsh. I know quite a few of the people on the call. I work for MayJuun, have for the last couple of years, and I was a participant when Project Unify first got started. What was that, Daniel? 2 years ago, maybe a little more?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've done quite a bit over that period of time with demonstrations, but the demonstrations have been kind of one-offs, if you will, something to demonstrate this function or that function. Now what we're proposing is to look at building a reference platform. The reference platform, the intent there is that people who are developing capabilities that we're prototyping, demonstrating, and so forth, can have some expectations of the deployment that they're putting their capabilities, their applications onto, and so forth. So something that's somewhat more standardized, and you can have expectations. I'll give you one example, Daniel. We're going to be seeing a little bit today from MayJuun, but I think the discussions that we need to have is, so how does consent work its way in here? What are the capabilities that we want to be able to demonstrate? Not just one little app, but a broader growing capability of applications. One of the things that has been really helpful for us recently, MayJuun first started implementing using the Google Cloud, and it works well. But more recently, we've become involved in Amazon, and Mary Sarah has been very helpful and so forth. So thank you very much, Amazon, for your help. One of the things that they've done is really imparted on us the best practices. So how can we do this, not just hack something together, but have something that's really solid going forward. So thank you, Amazon, for your help going forward here. And Daniel, go to the next slide, if you will. So now in today's presentation, we've got, hopefully I haven't heard her voice yet, Amber Weeks from the Interoperability Institute. And what Amber is going to be doing is talking about a couple of things. One is going to be the core capabilities that they have in their sandbox and what we are going to be building onto. And then secondarily, when she's done with that, she's going to be talking about the synthetic data. We've been working with Amber for a number of years now on generating synthetic data for the platform so that we can tell a coherent story when we're telling a story about a family and the participants in the family and so forth, that the Meld platform, which is their platform, can really contain the synthetic data that helps tell the story. And then after Amber's done, we're going to have Sarah Zaporta. Sarah is with MayJuun as well, and she's going to give us a real brief insight into cloud deployment, because what we're doing now, as I was saying, we work in the Google Cloud. Now we're working in AWS. So trying to get everybody to adopt best practices as they go forward. And then after that, we're going to have two people, the CEO of MayJuun, John Manning, and the CTO of MayJuun, Gray Falkenberry. So next slide, Daniel. Okay, Amber, are you with us?
I am here, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is Amber Weeks, and she's going to be talking a little bit about Meld, which we hope to kind of move into a reference platform so that we have expectations of what is capable for us to be able to deploy applications on top of. Amber, go.
Thank you. So good afternoon. As Dave said, I'm Amber Weeks. I'm the synthetic data manager at the Interoperability Institute, and I'm going to give you a Meld demo here in just a few minutes. But first, I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about the interop community and some of the things that we're doing. So if we can go to the next slide, please.
Yeah. One second.
No worries. There we go. So our mission is to utilize the Meld Sandbox to act as a tool that allows users to create easier and more efficient pathways to production for HL7 FHIR and FHIR products. The Meld Sandbox acts as a testing and validation tool for FHIR implementations, applications, and data. And our InterOp.Community is the steward of the Meld Sandbox. It helps to guide the direction for new features and synthetic data road mapping, and reference implementations. And the IC provides insight into what the healthcare community needs to continue testing, validating, and ideate around the FHIR standard. Because our tool is an open source offering, we are aiming for sustainability, whether that's through grants, communities of practice, sponsored projects. We're creating a long-term viability for Meld so that it's a persistent tool and an environment available for everyone in the healthcare community. Next slide, please. So how does this pertain to you? Why should you care? Well, we all know that FHIR is coming. We know that HL7 is currently working on and with FHIR, and federal regulations are driving forward interoperability with FHIR incorporated into the roadmap. As a community, we need to adapt to the coming changes and be ready to work with this standard to adapt data exchange processes. And to be prepared for advancements in the interoperability space, the community needs to test, create, and validate FHIR-based healthcare applications, solutions, and processes. We want to provide the community with a low-cost option to be able to do this. Using the Meld Sandbox, users can work with FHIR without concern of PHI exposure or inappropriate access. Next slide, please. The InterOp.Community is a collaboration of a number of healthcare and IT organizations that are focused on improving interoperability. These organizations provide guidance to the Meld Sandbox based on their various areas of expertise. We have a number of highly involved organizations like AWS, IHE USA, the Red Hat community, and BPM Plus, among others. Next slide, please. So Meld is an open source sandbox that stands on 3 pillars. It's code base, which includes Linux Foundation managed projects, global development community, a GitHub code curation. Another pillar is its users, with no cost to users, building out the OS application library. We've brought in the Inferno validator. We're expanding the offerings of our synthetic and de-identified data and trying to build out reference implementations. And the third pillar is our communities of practice, which include organizations and individuals coming together to solve these common healthcare data exchange problems. Next slide, please. So now that we've talked about why the sandbox is important and what it is, what can you do with Meld? Well, you can join us at the Meld OS Sandbox at the meld.interop.community, no cost, sign up free. I'm going to show you how easy it is to get in just a minute. You can download the Meld OS from the GitLab and use it however you need it. Come find us at an event, hackathons, connectathons, interopathons. We're going to be in Austin in 2 weeks at the IHE convention. You can find us in academic partnerships with different academic facilities, training the next round of workforce. You can join our community of practice and come join us and sponsor a Meld community of practice or focus on a path to production via reference implementation. You can invite whomever you want. Next slide, please. Oh, I think this one, next slide, please. I think I placed that one out of order. I'll come back to that. So we're going to go ahead and get into the demo. So let me share my screen.
You want me to stop sharing or?
Nope, that's okay.
Okay, great.
I think it's going to let me take it.
Good.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the Meld demo. If you want to register for Meld, you're going to go to meld.interop.community. You can see I've already got it pulled up here. And if you have an account, you would simply put in your username and password. If you need to register, you're just going to click the registration button here, fill in the information that it needs, and click the register. Once you click register, you will get an email that will invite you to set a password and access. It's just verification of your email. I already have an account, so I'm going to go back. Keep in mind that it can take up to 15 minutes to get that verification email, and you might want to check your spam folder. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And once I log into Meld, I'm brought to my sandboxes. You can see I've got quite a few of them here. And over here to the right, I've got some options to create a new sandbox where I can give my sandbox a name. I can choose which version of FHIR that I want my sandbox to be in. And I can allow an open FHIR endpoint. And I would click create and it would create a new sandbox for me. It's usually really quick, but it can take up to 15 minutes for that sandbox to finish spinning up. You can also import a new sandbox if you had one loaded in a zip. If you saved a backup copy of your sandbox, you could upload and then select the file that you were bringing it in from. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my sandbox. And I am launched right into the apps page. And so this will take me right to all of the apps that I have registered to my sandbox. Here you can see I've got a Billy Rubin risk chart. I've got a CDS hooks. I've got a couple of MayJuun apps and then a My Web app. If you wanted to be able to connect a Smart on FHIR application, you simply click the plus button and you can either register it manually or through a manifest. You have to have the launch URI for that application to connect it to your sandbox. Moving down the left-hand navigator here, I'm going to show you a couple of other things in our sandbox. So we have this EHR simulator. And using this, you can select a persona, a practitioner, for example. You're going to act as the practitioner and you're going to select a patient that exists in our sandbox and you can run the application with that patient data. So for example, if I wanted to run a Billy Rubin risk chart on Daniel, I would click that application and select authorize. And you see it populates the graph and shows it in the way that an EHR would. So if I was Susan Clark, the practitioner, and I was looking at it, this is how I might be able to see that information populate for me. Going back to my navigator, I've also got CDS hooks here. And on this, you have the opportunity to create new CDS services. So you would click here, you'd have to have the service URL, but you could register a CDS service to your sandbox. You also can set up launch scenarios. So here I have one set. You choose a persona, you can choose the application you want to do. And then you set different parameters, and with a click of a button, you can set that whole scenario up to run for you so that you don't have to walk through the process every time. In the Patients tab, we have a list of patients that exist in our sandbox already. These ones come preloaded into the sandbox for your use. If you see, you can see if I click on the patient's name, I get a graph of all of the resources that exist for this patient. So he's got 11 condition resources and an allergy intolerance. If I want to create a new patient, I would click the plus button, add information in there for him, and I'd be able to create a patient. The option for the data in here is that you can add, create, delete, however you want to change this data. It's your sandbox. Feel free to do it however you want. By clicking on the pencil, you are taken to the Patient Data Manager app, where you can get a better view of the resources that exist for this patient. And so here you can see he's got 263 observations. By clicking on the temperature observation, the information populates over here. That is the values for the data that's found in the FHIR resource. So for example, if I, for some reason, wanted to change his value, you just testing certain scenarios. Let's say I wanted to make the value of his temperature 40. Now, obviously, probably a little bit high. He might be dead if it's 40, right? But when I do that and I click save, you can see that the value changed in the table. So I'm updating and changing this data to meet my needs. Other functionality available with the FHIR resources from this view is that I can clone it. I can see the JSON for it if I wanted to scroll through the JSON. I've got that available. I can download the FHIR resource, or if I wanted to delete it altogether, I can just click this red X and it would delete that resource and it would take it right out of my sandbox. Moving down my list, I also have practitioners. So here you can see a list of all of the practitioners that exist in our sandbox. We wanted to create a new practitioner, same thing, put in the information. And you also have the availability to create a persona. Now, a persona in this format means that you're creating a smart auth user that would give authentication to a specific use case. And by doing this, you can click the patient or the practitioner that you want to create a persona for, select them, and then put in a user ID and password to act as them as the persona.
Amber?
Yes.
Could you just dwell on persona and use case a little bit? That question has been reverberating recently around different quarters. And I just think it's a great opportunity to hear kind of how you think about it, because recently Unify has contributed some scenarios with a variety of personas and use cases around into the Gravity project. And so it's interesting and important that we're synced up in terms of language around what is what. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that we have gotten feedback that we may want to change the name of that tab because personas and the way that we're naming it here in the sandbox is different than people would think of personas at large. As Dave mentioned earlier, he and I have worked together previously on some persona data. We worked together creating Sarah Thompson and her family, and it really personifies the patient records situation. And you can create the data to be exactly what you want it to be, tell the story that you want to tell, get the FHIR resources. So if you have a reference implementation and you want to create a patient that is specific to your reference implementation, you could create a data set that fits that story that you want to tell and use it over and over again to build recognition across the platforms and across the community for, oh, this patient has, is associated with the prior authorization or is associated with consents. And it helps to, Dave and his groups have really taken Sarah and evolved her story and added to her story. And the further along it gets, the more in depth it gets. And building on that means that you're building a foundation that's going to make it easier down the road, instead of one-offs where you have to keep recreating the data or getting data to fit the need. You've already got a wealth of data that you can continue to expand and improve on.
Yeah. So just as we move forward on this, just to interrupt it a little bit, is, we've taken the personas and turned them, graphically illustrated them as people. And so some of the way I think about personas is beyond an individual diagnosis. Right, it's a whole person, and that person has multiple diagnoses probably, and lots of different, potentially lots of programs. So the persona actually is made up of lots of different kinds of pieces. That fits into the scenario, which in our case is a family. And so the relationship between the mom and the brother and the kids, so it gets super complicated in terms of being able to think holistically about the family or the individual, and then to drive down to the individual use case of what it is we're trying to share data about. And so I think the more we can define that, and you do such a great job defining all the boxes and all the components of how we do this, that I think this last step, there's so much interest in specific use cases and specific personas. In every community wants to start with something different. They want to start with housing, or they want to start with behavioral health, or they want to start. So the ability and the flexibility is really super important.
I should remind folks that the Thompson family, that the Unify Thompson Hernandez family, I should say, we actually gave grandmother Ruth a last name of Hernandez recently, have been accepted by the Gravity Project PMO as Gravity Project personas. And just a couple of nights ago, I added them to the consolidated list of Gravity personas. And that includes a little bit of backstory for each of these guys, which I hope aligns with where you've taken the synthetic data in Meld, and the user stories that we've been working on within Unify have evolved as well for these families. So we may need to do a little fine tuning on the synthetic data and or the user stories to try to get things to align.
And I can tell you, I'm really excited to see how far Sarah and Jameson have come since we started working on them so many years ago. The story has really evolved and grown.
We moved them to Chicago about 6 months ago, so your demographic data may be a little out of date.
Just in time.
Absolutely.
Just in time for HIMSS.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you, what I love about personas is that it humanizes the story, and it makes you really, understand the demographics and all of the things that go into that patient and how it's built. And we try to, we definitely try when we create our personas to make sure that they are well-rounded. We try to make it, it's not Minnie Mouse, it's not Mickey Mouse, because that's not realistic, and people need realistic data to be able to identify with it and to be able to humanize that storyline. So
yeah, and I'll add to that we're kind of laying out a strategic plan, Kendra and myself, around synthetic patient data. We've talked to some organizations and stakeholders, especially big payers, and they're doing some pretty sophisticated things with synthetic patient data modeling, and even the thoughts around some sort of hybrid spigot approach where we have large sets of de-identified real human data alongside synthetic, and how you turn the spigots on from one to the other to balance out what analytically you're trying to evaluate.
That's excellent information, Jim. Thank you. So I know there's some other people that have to follow me, so I'm just gonna do quickly an overview of a couple of other things here. So Meld, you can load profiles. You can see that I've loaded the US core profile here. If you wanted to create a new one, you can import a package for that. And this allows you to run validation against those different profiles. So for example, if I go to tools, I can upload JSON, and I just happen to have the JSON available here. So I'm just going to copy it in. I can paste my FHIR JSON resource in there. I'm going to scroll down and hit next. I'm going to choose the profile that I want to run it against and validate it against. And you can see that it comes back with no errors, no warnings. So that FHIR resource meets the profile expectations. The patient data manager allows you to query for information within the sandbox, either by FHIR resource, or you can import data by pasting the FHIR resource in here. You can load it from a file, or you can export some data, do a query, pull back resources, and then export all of that to a file as well. And then the settings tab allows you to add users to your sandbox. You can bring anybody into your sandbox that you want just by going to the users tab and managing invites and invite someone else to your sandbox. So that is the end of the demo, and we can go back to the deck.
Cool.
And so again, just to let you all know, we think that Meld is stable, versatile, and so forth, and that's why we're looking at using Meld as the foundation for the reference platform as we move forward. So, Sarah, did you want to say a couple of things?
About deployment? Sure.
Yeah.
If we could move the, are we, Amber, I don't mean to step on your toes here. Are we done with this portion of the?
That's okay. I just wanted to throw out there that the demo or the Meld Sandbox is populated with synthetic data that we create at IOI. And we create that in two ways. We hand create personas to meet the needs of a reference implementation or a persona data ask. And then the other is using our synthetic data generator called PatientGen, which has 280 disease modules. And it's run on a Monte Carlo simulation to age a population of simulated patients, so you can get some longitudinal data as well. And we are looking at road mapping how to incorporate new reference implementations into the PatientGen code to be able to generate data to meet specific reference implementations that we can build sandboxes for on Meld. And that was it.
Thanks, Amber.
You're welcome.
Very useful. Sarah, did you want to say just a few words about your bringing AWS, bringing the MayJuun applications with AWS to the Meld platform?
Sure. So if we can advance the slide. Thank you, Amber, although it's a tough act to follow. But I will do my best here. So hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Zaporta, and I am the cloud DevOps engineer at MayJuun. And I am currently working on a few projects involving some CI/CD pipelines. For those of you who are familiar with GitHub Actions, that is our current tool du jour for these pipelines. And current states, we have quite a few workflows for easily building and deploying Questionario. And now with Google Cloud, we are able to create an entire project, enable all requisite service accounts, and enabled all APIs such as healthcare and artifact registry, and then from there build and deploy to said project. So it's basically an end-to-end pipeline in Google Cloud. And as we're trying to become more cloud agnostic, we're trying to move into AWS territory. And I'd like to echo Dave Walsh's sentiment before in thanking the AWS people here on the call. Thank you so much for your assistance. Because of your assistance, we've now been able to not only build Questionario using AWS cloud services, but we're also able to deploy as of last week. So the pipeline's been updated to include building and deploying in AWS. So now we're able to take the code base in Questionario from GitHub and then build that into an image and post in either Google Cloud Container Registry or AWS Elastic Cloud Registry or Container Registry, so ECR, and then deploy that through AWS ECS or Google Cloud Run. So we have a couple ways of deploying Questionario, and we're very grateful to AWS for assisting us in that. So thank you very much. But yeah, and we're very excited to use that in conjunction with Meld. So yeah, that's basically all I've had for this is the pipeline discussion. Are there any questions? I feel like I kind of zipped through that a bit.
Sarah, I have a question. This is Daniel.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing? This is great. I'm interested, when we were talking about the consent as a utility, one of the questions came up was, the portability between different cloud environments. And people talked about it. And Jim, if you're on the call here, I'm sure you have a few things to contribute here. But part of it is not to be cloud, dependent, right? And I don't pretend to know how that works, but the fact that both Google and AWS are being used to deploy this. Could you say just a bit more about how, like a solution, like a utility that we're talking about, could live and move to other cloud platforms, IBM or wherever else it might go?
Well, ultimately, the way I've tried to build these kind of pipelines is to kind of focus, and I like to use this analogy quite a bit, on modularity in a form like Legos, for instance, because I feel Legos is universal. Everyone knows Legos. And I feel that building kind of modules in GitHub Actions, and they're called workflows in this case, and kind of building them in such a way that you can kind of stack them based on what you need and then point them to whatever cloud provider you need to. So in essence, you only have to change a few variables, and that is cloud provider and like where the cloud provider's container registry would be. And then in changing just a very, you kind of tweak a few bolts, and then from there you can point to any cloud provider you'd like to. There's, of course, in connecting with them, there's a few different steps you'd need to take, but it's I found in trying to connect to AWS and Google Cloud, basically you just have a user that you can have as a service account, and that service account is assigned a certain number of permissions, and those permissions can only do a few things, such as enabling and linking billing accounts. And then that's where its permission set begins and ends. And then the next one takes over, to which that can push images to container registry and so on and so forth. But again, it's based on the cloud provider, and that, again, those few bolts you have to tighten or, change or whatever, but you can point it in any direction. That's the ultimate goal. Did that make sense? Or?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's great. And is that referred to as containerization?
Yes. Well, containerization is actually part of the process.
It has to be in a container, right? On that cloud to be discoverable through the registry.
Correct.
Yeah. Say that again. I missed the first part of that.
I'm sorry, I was mumbling too. So containerization is the notion that you have your code in a container. That container is discoverable through the registry that Sarah was describing across the multiple cloud providers, cloud service vendors.
Okay. Interesting.
But the term that we use a lot, Dan, just so you have a word, is cloud agnostic, right?
Yeah.
That's the word that I prefer anyhow, right? In cloud agnostic, there's some zealots that'll get really crazy about that, right? Because there's n number of clouds. No one works across all clouds, but ultimately we would want like a utility for consent to be as close to cloud agnostic as we can get it.
Right. That's where I was driving towards, just to make sure whatever we do. And Jim and I talked a lot about this early on at the Linux Foundation when he was hanging out over there. In order to design it so that it's cloud agnostic, but it is also can be applied efficiently through proprietary solutions in different, counties or states that might want to buy it, right?
Yeah.
That's the part that's also interesting, is how do you do that and not constrain the market, monopolize the market, so to speak.
And there always have to be custom builds and parts to it based on each of the respective platforms. But if it's designed around Kubernetes and some of the other open source cloud container tools that are coming out from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, you can build a significant portion of the framework to make it transportable from one cloud container to another.
Yeah.
That's exactly. And so there are some constants in our builds. Obviously, we have Docker files, which are required for part of the containerization that Jim and Aaron were referring to. So there are those constants, but the variables we want to keep, again, as cloud provider, or for a cloud provider, Kubernetes, because Amazon AWS's Kubernetes is going to differ from Google Cloud's Kubernetes, but there are some things that are going to remain the same, such as like Helm charts and everything.
Yeah, someday software will be easy, but not yet. So I wanted to give a huge shout out to Amber. Your presentation was very valuable to me. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to finding out ways about how to get engaged with the IOI. Very interesting. It's come a long way because I've been tracking it for feels like 2 or 3 years. So super, super impressive. Very, very good job.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
I believe, yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Amber. Thank you, Sarah. That is the description of what we're doing for the reference platform at the server level. What we'd like to do right now is change the focus into deploying an application, an app, onto one of these cloud environments. And in order to do that, Daniel, if you can go to all right, John, are you going to do the slide now?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, so this is John Manning, the CEO of MayJuun, and Gray Falkenberry is on with him to kind of tag team on some of these issues. But this is an application that's going to be deployed on that cloud, or is deployed on that reference platform cloud. So
thank you. Can you all see my screen? That's a presentation. Great.
Yep.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. And also thank you to, there's a lot of friendly faces over here. So thanks to our colleagues from Open City Labs, Zane Networks, Ivanov Consulting, Dr. McCoy, EMI, and others, and Interoperability Institute for doing this co-presentation. It's been a very interesting journey and a wonderful journey that we've had over the last few years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about dynamic FHIR surveys. And since the conversation had started with consent, I want to try and focus that a little bit towards consent as well. This is usually best done as a dialogue rather than monologue. So please raise your hand, ask questions, throw it in the chat. I have them open and I can see it. I'm going to define questionnario briefly, but we have questionnario and recitario as two things that you'll see as a kind of demo, but just to kind of see, we're trying to be as cloud agnostic as we can. So if we're setting things up for Google or AWS, Azure, others, that's part of what we like to do through MayJuun. So my name is John Manning. I'm the emergency doc and CEO of MayJuun. I practice clinically. I took care of kids a couple of days ago and adults a few days before that. Our company as a whole has about a total of 50 years of clinical practice in 8 countries. We wrote a textbook. We have a lot of informaticians, emergency medicine, internal medicine, and pediatrics, and a lot of operational experience as well. We have certified DevOps engineers, Google certified developer expert in Flutter, and we built applications for Connecticut, New Jersey's Integrated Care for Kids, which I'll talk about briefly, for a large specialty organization and for a number of EMS agencies as well. Our products to date have entered into open source and closed source arenas. We like building things open source when we can, and we build them closed when it makes sense to do that. The majority of what I'm going to talk about, of course, is questionnario, which builds from this concept of Firefly, which I will also define, and an open source questionnaire app that we built a few years back that had harnessed the Prepare survey. We realized that building questionnaires for one survey was great, but then we wanted to build it dynamically so it could work with different surveys and languages. We kind of defined this before, at least in the fact that we love building blocks, and interoperability kind of fits with that theme. It needs to be interoperable, has to be able to be swappable from one technology to another. And often our demos, we make a point of trying to show and specifically connect to as many different systems as we can, just to prove the point and to see if we can do that. I'll define FHIR as one of the big underpinnings that we build from. Flutter is another one, which I'll define in a second, Firefly, and that next level up, which is also a building block, is Questionario. So Firefly officially is FHIR with Flutter library integration. We do have permission from HL7 to use that title, which we love. It's really cute, but it's not an endorsement from HL7. If you have not heard of Flutter, it is how you can build an application for any screen. It is open source by Google. It is barely 4 years old, and it is also all over the place now in the last 4 years. It's in Toyota's cars, it's in the New York Times app, it's in BMW's app. It is actually the third largest open source project on GitHub by contribution numbers. And 700,000 apps have been deployed to the Google Play Store in the last 4 years. And people love developing on it because it's very easy to build stuff, and you can build something with one code base for Android, iOS, the web, Mac, PC, and Linux. So all 6 platforms with one line or one set of code. So what we did with Firefly was we took the FHIR standard in its various released versions and R5, and then we allow you to display an application in Flutter. So you take FHIR in, you display it in Flutter, and then you connect through FHIR as well in your application. So that could be Google Cloud, happy in its iterations, including Interoperability Land and Meld. So for the simulated sandboxes as well. In all, the Firefly packages that we provide that allow you to build an application in Flutter and connect it to healthcare data is about 10 million lines of code. 9.6 to be exact, according to 3 separate code counters, which had a very high, steep estimated cost to develop that we built in just under a year. That's our building block that we provide to the community that we've then built from there to help satisfy different use cases. So one of the applications that we're going to talk about is Questionario, which will take industry standard questionnaires. I'll provide them in multiple languages with a number of accessibility resources that are some built out of the box with Flutter, others that we did custom, and then use the standard needs for data exchange and translations. This is essentially the proper term is a white label app, meaning it can be branded, themed differently depending on the use case, because technology done right is best invisible. So we built for New Jersey's Integrated Care for Kids. It is branded as Health Story, and the themes and colors and everything, the content, and even the languages match their end users and match the group. For Connecticut's Integrated Care for Kids, it's branded as Health Journey. We like referring to this as Questionario, but it can certainly be themed in a number of different ways. I think it's probably just best to show at this point. And again, please interrupt and ask questions. Yes, the best software is invisible. So one of the things that we like, at least just showing, within here. So I'm in Meld's InterOp.Community. I'm going to just show you an application in development called Recetario, which is the recipe book for our questionnaires that we can use to build things quickly. I'm going to fully show you the personas so that you can actually see this from start to finish, where it will ask me the standard SMART authentication and authorization questions, if it allows me to do this. I'm going to make a brand new task in questionnaire. And I'm just going to send a very quick 4-question application. And since this is the demo, we can send this to any email that we want. But I'll just send this to one quickly just so that you can see access for that. So what you'll see over here, let's see if it'll actually cross, is I get a quick question. And then this is for demo purposes that has assigned me a task that gives me a one-time login. If I try to use that task number again, certainly, there's, if I'm not using that specific link, you won't be able to go through that. We've done different ways of logging in and authentication as well, but that is the standard Smart on FHIR application. And then I'll just kind of click through and hit submit, and all is said and done. And then finally into this, I'll just say back into the Meld community, back onto this interoperability sandbox. Oh, let's see if this will actually work. Select a patient and Karen Adams. And let's see if we can get our information. So before we had 4 tasks, now we have 5. If you look through authored on, this is our time at 1850, and we have this filled out with a essentially the percent of tasks completed is 100%, and it will tell me that, and I can get to all that information from there. So if I wanted to get to the actual questionnaire response, I could get to that in a number of different ways, such as with doing a specific FHIR query and actually go into the JSON, or a number of different ways. That is a very quick run through of one questionnaire on one part of that application. What we had built for specifically for our integrated care for kids partners is 17 different questionnaires, depending on age group, from age 0 to 20. For Connecticut, it's up to 21, that will load a total of somewhere between 5 and 7 questionnaires per age group, and we'll load them in a number of different languages. For New Jersey, it's 4 separate languages. We're managing about 300 different variations of how that actually will go across, from the questionnaires, the tasks, the value sets, and everything like that in multiple languages. In all, it's about 6,000 separate fields or data points within just one use case. And when you're trying to scale something from more than just one group, how can you actually work with this on a higher level? And I'll just show, I'm not going to show all the questions, but just to show each one of these is its own separate questionnaire. How can you make this as easy as possible, and how can you make that so that it scales, where whatever questions you're asking, and be they checkboxes, radio buttons, etc., how can you work through that? One of the things that we've done, in part by necessity from the project that we were building, was we essentially created a spreadsheet that allowed us to very quickly get to all of the different types of a FHIR questionnaire resource, and then generate that into JSON that then we would import so that we can manage that vast wealth of content. And some of that also included consent. So, asking for you to sign the consent as soon as the questionnaire would actually load is one use case that we've done through this. There's a separate one where for one of our clients, they wanted the consent to actually be, there's pre-consent for actually going through this, but then consent as to whether or not you're going to share those resources when the entire survey is completely filled out. So there's different use cases for that. And then we've even had consent that is within a questionnaire where as you're going through this, here as the example, it says this is sensitive information. How do you want to share the questions that are within this one specific resource at the beginning? And then based on what you actually say, will determine what the end users actually see at the end. So as you're filling out this question, there's consent that is actually embedded directly within that resource. So I can go in depth, a little more depth on some of these elements as well. Can someone consent to or deny capturing or sharing a questionnaire item? Yes, exactly. That is exactly what this life experiences consent addresses as to, they've decided this is a sensitive questionnaire. Are we going to be able to share this with the end users? Yes, no. If no, then all you can see is the score, which I can go in a little bit more depth on at the end as well. So that, I think, is a really important part kind of as you're looking through this. I'll also just show, so similar to, and I guess I can show you from the very beginning. So for, again, this is one app of Questionario that can be themed or branded in a number of different ways. What Ian showed down at the bottom was a demo version of this for New Jersey. Here is a demo and a part that's actually connecting for Connecticut that will give me a one-time login that I'll actually log through. It will bring this up, and then I'll actually show you that consent piece that's at the very beginning and what that also turns into. So I get emailed or texted a password here at the very beginning once I've clicked the button. Hopefully this will cross over. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay on this one. For consents, we agree. What was the question?
John, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Rita asked if you were able to implement a questionnaire consent that would allow a user to say, do not share this questionnaire response, this data, this particular question in a questionnaire response. And I wasn't clear on how you enforce that. Where's the policy enforcement point? I can see how you could capture it, but I'm not clear on how you could enforce it when that questionnaire response was being shared across the wire with an external entity. Maybe I misunderstood what you were saying you could do, but I'm not sure. I misunderstood something. So it's important that
no worries.
We're all on the same page about that kind of granular consent control and what it really means, right? And I've been following Rita for a long time, so I think I want to make sure that we're all on the same page and chatting about it in the same way. So in your 4-question questionnaire, let's say I elected to not share the 3rd question. Where's the policy enforcement point that you would be able to redact that before it was shared with my PCP?
Everything that we've built has been for the need, specifically of the users that we've worked through. So for one, it wasn't a question level consent to share or not. It was a entire questionnaire level consent to share or not. And you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong as to what the security flag is for OIS, OOS versus OIC, OOC. One of them is a broader level and the other one is a little bit further down. For one of them, which is, do you consent for this entire resource? And yes or no, and you fill out whatever your signature actually is here. That's the broad level. Whereas the one that is down to the level of this questionnaire, you're filling it out just only for this questionnaire group and the responses that are therein. And based on how those security flags are held will determine what access the other users that are a part of that FHIR server will be able to see or not. And so that is how this is managed, at least on the larger side. We use value sets for this. We've done FHIR path with a number of these things as well. I know this talk started as let's get technical, but I'll just mention that
let you finish. I'm sorry, I didn't want to.
Yeah, no. Sure.
No, actually, I have a follow-up question to that area.
Yeah, of course.
Go on, John. Finish your thought.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to maybe answer this already, but can you envision how to get granular on a per question basis in a facile way? Because in the consent world, there are some you want to be able to get that granular on a question by question basis. So I think that's where Aaron was headed.
Yeah, and I
Sure,
think, John,
Joel.
John, just to kind of follow through with that part that you were sharing, right? You know, I can have all kinds of security tags, right? The question is, where's the policy enforcement point and how do I send it external to my FHIR server? I heard you were very specific that within my FHIR server, I can constrain when a person says, don't share the third question. And I think Rita's question, and I think the larger question for the SOC Institute and so forth, right, is Soki. Thank you, Matt. The question is like, how do we make it discoverable and enforceable and trustworthy at scale across FHIR, not just within a FHIR server? That's like the holy grail that we're all after, right?
That's the whole point of why these conversations are happening.
Absolutely.
You know, I can speak to what we built, matching the specifications of what we needed with the users that are, and there's 3 groups that are here that are all connecting to the same FHIR instance and following those same policies. And so this could certainly start as a stepping point of that conversation of, well, if they didn't consent to share it, they shouldn't be sharing it. But then that's where we need to have larger consensus to make sure that's happening. To answer the question from earlier about, well, can you have this actually be down to the level of granularity of the question? And you know, you could make the argument about embedding stuff through FHIR or structure mapping as an opportunity with which to do that. The other things that we've noted just firsthand, so like the date of birth of the patient, the date that I'm actually signing, the patient's name, the parent's name, all of that information, because we can get that information ahead of time. You don't have to hand fill that. And so that was some of the ways that we had found kind of the hard way, just to make this as easy as possible for those end users. But realistically, when we're thinking through that actual consent piece, I think it's really important that we have some level of consensus, and you know, we built what we built to match this need, and we are happy to step that up for other use cases and instances as well. But that is where we found as our starting point. Good questions. And thank you, Dr. McCoy, for sharing the where those questionnaires actually came from. And many thanks to all the efforts that you did on this project, because we are only displaying work that was designed and built by others. So thank you for all of that.
Well, let me just ask a question quickly. Chris, is that really from the ACEs, California ACEs, or ACEs in general?
That's what those specific questions are that are potentially suppressed. That's what John was showing. And we only applied that particular standard to that set of questions because that was the intent of the designers of California ACEs, that only a score would be reported. But because other folks, including people in New Jersey, were already in the habit of using the specific answers, we left it up to the family to choose which way to go.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking, I don't know if anybody is, you know, California has made a gigantic investment in ACEs, but I don't believe that, I don't know, maybe Dan on the phone knows. Are they capturing? I mean, they divided the state up into like 1 million different regions, and I don't know if they have a uniform way of actually capturing it. And I think it's legislatively required or recommended, I don't remember which one, that ACEs is becoming part of the sort of the clinical infrastructure, I think.
Yeah.
The process is differentiated by counties. We have a grant here in Santa Cruz. We're participating in that as we speak, but it's not quite uniform, I believe, in terms of aggregation and dissemination of information that we're still working out. I know.
Are you collecting ACEs information?
We've just begun.
Okay. Oh yeah. So you have started. Okay, cool.
Right. And it's less than 18. I think it's every year, Christine, and every person should have at least one screen, I believe.
Right. This is a paid service. I mean, providers get reimbursed for completing this with the children that they care for. The other thing I should point out is that the granular data is actually tabulated for certain uses for creating the social risk score for children. So while it is not reported, only the score is reported to anyone using a report of what comes out of Questionario. Behind the scenes, some of their answers to specific questions would go into their social risk score, which is then melded with their medical risk score to create what's called a health risk score. So this is, this risk scoring business is a hot topic these days. So we are using this data at the individual level, despite suppressing the specific answers being reported to case managers, providers, et cetera.
Dr. McCoy, did you mean paid in New Jersey or California or everywhere?
So in New Jersey, the larger set, this entire Questionario set of questions is reimbursable to the provider for reviewing it with the family or the older child. And in California, the ACEs, just that ACEs component is reimbursable.
To finish that thought, so if I for Questionario, I'm going to use some keyboard shortcuts just to fill out the last couple of questions quickly. But once I've filled that out and done a consent, which for this one is at the end as the example, you can see where the scores actually are for the specific questions that are there. And so it'll tell you if this is low risk, medium risk, or high risk as per what we had published for our implementation of the SDC workflow. So this is on our MayJuun website under Firefly, under our blog post that Dr. Falkenberry was kind enough to put out, and as one of the published examples of structured data capture. So for this, where you're asking and answering a lot of questions and things actually are getting scored, we have consent for one user at the very beginning, consent that's at the very end while you're filling everything out, and some that are specific within one of those questionnaires, be it PEARLs or ACEs, depending on your age group. And then you'll see summative level answers based on what you had actually filled out that will tell you your low risk, medium risk, or high risk, plus the overall scoring. And that's how eligibility is determined for this group. Hopefully I gave that justice, at least from our perspective of what we've built and implemented to satisfy the need. So language translations was one thing that we thought was really, really important. I can go in depth on that, but suffice to say, a lot of our efforts are heavy into the SDOH space, even though they can be utilized in a number of different ways. Thank you for Gravity for showcasing some of our works in OCL and Open City Labs. Thanks to ACL for all of the efforts that we did over the last, 2.5 years. And I'll end by mentioning that the open source foundation that we have with Firefly is now used in 7 countries. And we have a Slack channel and, certainly are interested in building things together. So I'm happy to answer additional questions. Thank you for keeping this as a dialogue, but I wanted to at least go through what our perspective was with regards to consent, how that's been implemented at Questionario, how that's been connected through Meld, and certainly go from there.
Bravo, bravo. It's great.
If I could genuflect with an emoji, I would genuflect. That was amazing, John.
Aaron, I'm sure there's one there somewhere.
Really good job, man. That's awesome stuff.
Hey, this is Mary. I got on a bit late, but wanted to thank the MayJuun team for both an awesome presentation and also being a great partner, being able to enable that Flutter framework on the open source Meld platform and making that transition to make the platform available to this community, and have to give appropriate attribution to our colleagues at AWS who supported the Interoperability Institute in being able to enable this partnership and bring this forward. I don't know if that was noted earlier, but I wanted to make sure to give all the appropriate attributions, because it really took a team to bring this together, and really showing that power of open source, what we can do with the platform, which I know I'm going to make Jim St. Clair cringe with the digital twin side, but then enabling how we can bring these solutions that we learn in the simulation environment forward onto a path to production.
Plenty of accolades earlier. Yes, we're delighted. Everyone is coming together. It's been a long haul, Mary.
Mary, I'm glad you were able to join. I wanted to ask, I was going to ask Amber, but maybe you are a better person to answer. What is the Meld sustainability strategy, and how do we contribute to it and help you? For Interop.
That is a fantastic question, Aaron. Right now, we are actively focused on building out the Meld code set. There's just a lot of lift in a long list of feature functions. So looking for developers to really build out that open source development community, being able to enable additional applications like the partnership with MayJuun to show we have a number of private sector entities who are offering limited free trial. Folks can kick the tires on in the open source space and then determine whether it will work within their specific situation. Longer term, Aaron, we have been working with a number of thought leaders, and again, a shout out to AWS for helping us to really think through and look at some sustainable business models for an open source asset like Meld. So more to come on that, ideally in the near future. So Daniel will reserve the right to reach out to you to provide a brief to this community as that solidifies.
Yeah, I think earlier on, Mary, I talked a little bit about the HIMSS policy workshop and then the interoperability showcase, and the this work is put in the context of having multiple upcoming opportunities to continue to massage it together and to actually bring it to scale in places that it's ripe for doing right now. And to your question, Aaron, I think sustainability runs through CMS 9010. That's in my mind, and in the conversations I've been having, is that is a model for this kind of work. On every state can tap into those sources, and I think there's.
Oh, maybe I didn't ask my question correctly. I understood that, Daniel. What I'm really interested in is how can I start supporting or contribute to the support of the Institute, right? What I've seen today about Meld is like amazing, right? So it's one of the things that, like Gravity, I want to be able to contribute to and help and make sure it survives, right? I don't see any particular state doing 90-10 or doing a 10% even. I don't know that CMS would approve us funding IOI directly. So I was trying to figure out, how do we help her keep her shop running? Sounds like she's got some great sponsors already though. So.
Well, Mary, can you share a couple use cases of how you see Meld being used beyond just the reference models?
Certainly. So Aaron would welcome your support and engagement. I think, as we saw from today's presentation, a lot of focus around the reference implementations, and what we're looking at is both sponsorship to stand up specific reference implementations, lots of interest in the industry around Gravity, around SDOH, around where are the solutions like the presentation that we saw from MayJuun today. but also beyond, a lot of entities have stood up a sandbox, right? Basically, they've taken their dev or test environment, painted it up and said, yay, we have a sandbox, and they're standing up a reference implementation of their solution in their sandbox. What we've done is a little pivotal focus on that to stand up in the Meld environment as a shared community commons, a reference implementation. If you've got the goods, bring the goods, hook up to the reference implementation, show that you've got the wares, be able to connect to the platform. I mean, the industry doesn't understand APIs really well and how to do APIs. Took us a really long time to figure out how to do web services, right? So to have that shared resource that we can build and coalesce and have intelligent conversations around solutions. So looking at different models for both those that want to be part of the build activity and sponsoring the build of a reference implementation, those who maybe don't have those resources, but want to subscribe to a reference implementation to be able to take advantage of the synthetic data of a free FHIR server, et cetera, et cetera. And then also under Amber's capable leadership, we've engaged with a number of academic partners, and we need to do some skill building of the workforce in the health industry. I've talked to several academic faculty who teach HL7 FHIR, the industry standards. They're like, oh my gosh, Mary, it is so boring, right? I have to teach these standards. I fall asleep reading them. I have to assign these reading assignments. They're falling asleep while I'm lecturing. I brought in this interactive sandbox to actually pull down a Smart on FHIR app and install it. Right now, teaching about some of the challenges in the SDOH space for the industry, the availability of the trial of the MayJuun solution. It is a game changer for informatics programs. Build a FHIR resource, change a FHIR resource, load up a Smart on FHIR application. Now, humans being able to have that didactic experience and not reading through 1,300 pages of data standards is a game.
1,405. Don't change
okay,
how many pages I've
I
written.
stand corrected. But being able to act, I mean, that's how I learn best, right? Is by doing, getting on the keyboard and saying, okay, what
How do I
is the
break
FHIR
this?
resource thing?
Yeah,
Pull
yeah.
down the implementation guide. Oh, I have a standing, openly available reference implementation of the Gravity implementation guide or of a DaVinci implementation guide. I need this for my core business. I need this. I want to educate through my informatics curriculum to have those resources available. And so some of the models we've been looking at to sustain that are simple, lightweight, not very expensive subscription models, but also want to look at key partnerships to be able to contribute sponsorship for some of the major lift.
I'm sorry, it's so fascinating, right? Have you had an opportunity to talk to Viet at HL7 and around his Foundry idea? It seems like there's an overlap, a lot of synergies that you guys can find.
Absolutely, many times, and actually pulled together a proposal for Viet to present to the HL7 board on this approach, and we've formalized a statement of understanding with the Vulcan group at HL7, which we understand is very focused on the technology and the platforms and making these resources available to that group.
All right.
Good show, guys.
We are officially in the double overtime. So just a few wrap up words. If anyone's got some more questions, we don't have a hard stop, but I have one more thing I wanted to say. John, that was great. Thanks, Amber. Thanks, Dave. Everybody, it's great. So we're really looking forward to Austin and then HIMSS and then beyond HIMSS moving forward in terms of actually bringing stuff to scale. And I feel compelled to just sort of build on the conversation we just had with Mary and Aaron's question about sustainability, because I think we need to think big. And I think that the only way to think big is through government funding, sustainable multi-year funding to create projects that will have a runway of 5 to 10 years. It's kind of like the EHRs, you know, we're moving on sort of, you know, V2 on EHRs. So in the same way, some of these things, particularly on the consent side, in my opinion, with all the legal, maybe less of the technical, it's going to take a long time to get embedded into organizations. And so the same way, I think, and I'll, you know, certainly shout out credit to Christine and others who, you know, from the Inc. world saw the opportunity to come together to co-develop stuff, kicking and screaming in many cases, but a few got it, because we can do this together better, because everybody's got to go through a lot of this learning and we don't need to create it all the time. So things like Inc., things like whole person care initiatives that are statewide, multiple counties, some of the efforts, certainly the HIRSA efforts and many of the ACF efforts that really reverberate across the entire country. The meeting at HIMSS is about moving the conversation to that kind of scale. Is that how can we do 100 counties or 1,000 counties, right, in the country over the next 10 years? And so you can embed it broadly. Is there a big enough standard? Is it can it go forward enough? Is the technology mature enough to be able to create some kind of utility, right? So Civitas is talking utility. Conceptually, I propose that we're talking about consent as an actual implementation of a utility asset that can be then deployed broadly across on whatever cloud platform across the country. And I think we've got the people here to do it. But I want to just raise the conversation to that level. I don't want to dismiss it because there's so many people on this call and other calls that are just trying to get by, you know, trying to keep the lights on and trying to find money from philanthropy. And philanthropy, God bless their soul, is not the place to do this. And membership is great, but it incentivized industry in a way that is maybe disproportionately too much. And the volunteer time of being able to put time into it is also industry weighted. So I think government has to really is ready to do this. Hopefully the people are ready to step forward, and there's enough money that's going to come flowing in over the next couple of years that should be able to address these kinds of issues, especially in the context of an MMIS budget. It's just ridiculous. It's pocket lint in order to solve some of these problems. Anyway, that's where
just one last thing from me,
great,
Daniel, and that is that so this time next month we will have a full operational cloud structure for ODH, so that, you know, people can go, they can look at it, they can work on it, they can add content to it, they can do whatever they want to do with it. It will have, you know, everything that we've done to date. The only thing is that, you know, for things that are proprietary, then, you know, if people wanted to implement the ODH in their environment or whatever, and they wanted those proprietary pieces, they'd have to pay for them. So other than that,
great, that's great.
You know, you'll see the operational data hub in the cloud to be able to, you know, use it to look at, test, figure out, you know, what you like and what you don't like, and so on and so forth. So there you go. And by the way, that's the same infrastructure that's in New Jersey Inc. and Connecticut Inc. So
yeah.
So Ken,
we'll see that.
Yeah, that's great. I hope we can sort of embed that in the showcase and in Austin and in the policy workshop, because it's great. It's, you know, the implementation is happening, and it might be the right time. Who knows?
Yep.
Could be there.
Anyway, did somebody else want to say something? That got cut off.
Oh, Ken, I was just going to ask if you had a link. I would love to learn more about the operational data hub.
I don't know. We'll get you some information, Mary. Right.
Fantastic.
If you go, Michelle Zenkem and others gave the presentation on parts of it a couple weeks ago. So there's a link. Let me see if I can find the direct link. Did somebody find a link? Here, if you go, just for people who are still here, we do record each of the sessions, usually up within a day or so. It's on the NIC site, which needs a lot of help. So if there's designers out there that want to put a little time into sprucing it up, we've got a great wealth of recordings from the last couple of years on all these folks. So there's a lot of information, a lot of resources there. It's a little hard to find if you don't have the direct link. But you go there and there's a bunch of the ones that have presented lately, and there's a membership and there's some good stuff there. So we'll be sort of sprucing that up hopefully as we go forward. Okay, any last thoughts, folks? Questions? Toasts? Can I see how many people are going to be at HIMSS?
Well,
Or maybe?
I'm planning to. I don't know if I'll make it there or not. We'll see. Just started that process today, so see how that goes.
They sure make it fun to travel as a Fed, right?
Oh man.
So I have no home life. So I'd love to just chat some more with you, Ken, or whoever's working on this ODH case management system. Make sure I understand the scope of it. So if there's anyone that is tracking that or could help educate me, because case management means a lot of things to a lot of different people. I want to make sure I understand, you know?
Yeah.
You have a big vision, a very big vision.
Yeah, Aaron, thank you. Thank you for that question, because I was thinking I'll have to go back and look at the webinar from a couple of weeks back, because it came from the government system that did case management for public health, which had its own definition, context, suite of tools, etc.
Yeah, it's hard when, it's hard to be a human because, our language is so limited, but maybe just
Michelle Zancan knows the most about it because she's the one doing the implementations and keeping them running and all that kind of stuff. So, but she's also quite busy. So I don't know how much bandwidth she has to be chatting about this, that, or the other thing.
Right.
but I'm sure if you can come up with a date and time, she'll give you demos and talk to you and do whatever you need to do.
Yeah. It's just super important piece of solution that's missing for a lot of our CBO friends.
Yeah, well, as soon as we get our person-centered capabilities squared away in FHIR, it'll be even better.
Yeah. And if we had a universal identity solution, we can do consent, identity. What else do we just want to, have 90-10 matching funds solve for?
Indeed.
You got all the pieces, Aaron.
You have them all done, Jim?
All done? Not yet. I just got to keep convincing people to.
Well, it's a little bit of I just had this conversation today with our new colleague at the Benefits Data Trust, BDT, who's doing extraordinary work on connecting people to available resources and struggling with all sorts of challenges, but at the state level. And what I shared with him there is an attorney who's looking at a lot of the privacy issues and the permissions that you have to get through at the state level to get even to be able to ask to share the data around who your Medicaid recipients are. So you can tell them that they can get SNAP benefits. You gotta get permission for that. Before you can even ask for consent, you got to get permission. A whole nother universe of insanity.
Yeah, but that there's no legal basis for that. You know,
Right,
and
right.
so,
But that's
know.
exactly it, Ken. And so we were saying, look, wouldn't it be possible if you were to point at another state or 2 or 3 or 4 that are actually doing it in a different way, as opposed to being completely dependent on your AG or your policy, you know, your privacy policy people, and to be able to say, hey, it's happening here or there.
Yeah, well, we're you know, starting to work with the Virgin Islands to implement a case management solution down there, and so that you know, brings federal money to the table and so on and so forth with APDs and stuff. So it may be useful to try and, you know, put that project together and then, you know, have enough money to actually do the implementation. So
Well, I'll say it out loud, and I've had the conversation twice with Ed Dolly, and I don't use people's names lightly.
Yeah.
But you know, I met Ed at the APHSA conference. I met him at another conference. And
I know Ed.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. He's the state systems. He's took Jess Kahn's job, right? And we begat Rick Friedman. And you know, they enabled a lot of this work. And I asked him explicitly the question. He explicitly said, "It's going to service the Medicaid program. Makes sense to me." Talk to the regionals, you know. So part of the challenge is you got to talk to the regionals and get them on board. But that's where you come in.
I'm not sure who the regionals are, but I'm sure we can figure that out.
I think we can, yes. And so I've heard it in my own ears, so I'm not making it up. And we found the chapter and verse of, you know, where the funding comes from in the regulations. So it's that getting over that inertia of no, we can't, you know, of no one's done it before. I'm not going to be the first sacrificial.
Right.
Yes,
but
we can.
We have a federal expert with APDs on our team at ACF.
Yes.
So, you know, we don't have to worry about that. He knows exactly what has to be done and so on. So and he also works with all the other agencies, CMS, CDC, et cetera, for doing a shared APD for multiple states, for example, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we have that capability.
Good to hear. Good to hear that ACF is investing in that as well, because it's such a big agency and it's got so many connecting points and internally. No less
Yeah,
externally.
they put all their money out on the street though, and it leaves very little left over for us to actually do real work with. So and I'm, you know, we're trying to change that as well. But you know, it's a new environment, really, if you think about it, because they've never done this kind of stuff before. And but Kevin Duvall, who's the CTO and who I work for now, is very gung-ho about what's going on and stuff. So at any rate, we may see some good movement here shortly, but we'll see.
Yeah, you know, just one other comment that reminded me of when I had the good fortune of working with ACF under the Obama administration. One of the things that, you know, there's a lot of discussion around how to sort of improve the process inside the various programs and within the across the agency. And there was no IT structure, right? There was nobody really doing what you were doing. So every program was really dependent on themselves to come up with their own infrastructure, which is why none of the things actually connect.
That's right.
But one of the things that was very interesting at the assistant secretary level was the ability to use basically the I forgot what that's called now, the annual appropriation that goes out, right? To enable sharing resources to build common platforms, right? You could actually embed that language in the annual requirements that would then allow states to say, oh, we've got these different funding streams. We can blend, we've got some TANF money, we've got some child support money, we've got some ACF money, we've got some 4E for, we can actually put that together and use it and not run afoul of the actual program requirement, right?
Right. Well, you know that ACF just built a new TANF system, right? And
For who?
and then for ACF,
Oh, their
because
internal system?
we collect TANF data, right? And
From the
and
state
we-
TANF data, right?
Yep, state
Yeah.
data. And then we compare it with SNAP and to determine whether people are, getting money in multiple states and so on and so forth. So, but at any rate, they built a new system that's just like the old system because, they didn't have any knowledge and capability to do anything else, right? And then I'm not sure they have the money yet to put it into production. So there you go.
It's like you were sharing some Who lyrics, man.
Yeah, man.
You won't
Well,
get fooled again.
That's the way government works.
Yep. Yep.
At any rate, y'all
Well,
take care. And
Yeah,
Here's the new boss, same as the old boss, right?
exactly.
Yep. None of these people are Who fans. I feel horrible now. You have to be a Who fan. Falconberry, tell me you love the Who.
I love the Who. I saw them live in Miami a couple years ago.
Yeah, I even saw them in Buffalo in '87.
Nice.
Nobody knows what it's like to be jaded, Aaron.
Be the sad man behind blue eyes. Any case, you guys are awesome. I love working with you all.
that was the first concert I heard in high school. And I
No
was deaf.
kidding.
I was deaf for at least 3 days. I couldn't hear, we literally had ringing in our
was-
ears.
I
That was
had a
Pete
contact
Townsend.
high for like 3 days after mine.
Oh, that too. All right, well, it's always hard to say goodbye, but I
is.
think we've actually reached a new record today, nearly 2 hours. Thanks, everybody. Great
you.
meeting. We'll have it posted up here, and I think feel free to share this around. This is an awesome.
Yeah, this video has to go viral, man. Good job,
Yeah,
John.
this is
Everyone did a
changing.
great job. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.